Hello, pod smashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit pod smash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer.
I got it. We're your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I'm Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are going to talk about the infamous Lootbox, its rise, its fall, its maybe not actual fall. We'll discuss all that and more, but before we get all into all that, we are Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
Ooh, I am actually drinking a whiskey, but
I'm not drinking beer either.
To not spoil my favorite things too much, I went to Dogfish Head, like proper, and got a spirit that you cannot find anywhere around here. I know they distribute locally in Delaware, but not in Maryland or Virginia close to us. So what it's called is Dogfish Head Let's Get Lost American Single Malt Whiskey. It's 102 proof. So woo! Here's what the bottle says. It's kind of fun. Pour a glass and join us on a whiskey walkabout. Let's Get Lost American Single Malt Whiskey is intensely immersive, layered, and nuanced, both warming and enticing. Each sip is a sensory adventure, inviting you to disconnect and tempting you on your own explorative journey. Go on, grab a glass, and let's get lost. Distilled from scratch using a custom blend of malted barley and aged over 3 years in charred American oak, warming and complex, each sip expresses itself with green apple, the caramelized sugar notes of banana foster, tobacco, and spice.
Nice.
And
Lovely.
it is all of that. It is very complex, but it's boozy. I mean, 51% alcohol, it's 102 proof.
Sure, yeah.
I generally sip on bourbons and stuff, which are distilled or like watered down to lower than that.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact range. It's
Me and my buddy Nate, when we briefly lived together for a few months. And when we lived together, he would always have a bottle of Captain Morgan 100 proof.
Woo.
And we would do shots of it. Like, whenever we'd have a hard day, like me in school and him at work, we'd come home and look at, we need some Captain.
Boom, done.
So I got
Down the
very
hatch.
used to. Now regular Captain Morgan tastes weak to me. So,
Dang.
yeah.
Okay.
But the 102 proof sounds delicious. I'm into it.
It is. It's very delicious. It's very complex and roasty. And I know they used, when they were talking about their distilling happening, they use some of the same recipes from their beer mash in their alcohol that they will distill. So instead of like fermenting it, they distill it, and it's a whole thing. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's the base ingredients are some of the same things they use in their beers. So sometimes you get notes from the beer in the whiskey, and it's awesome. So go get it if you can. And if you're anywhere around Delaware and you can go to Dogfish Head, go get it.
Nice. I am drinking. My buddy Justin was visiting last weekend, and he left me this random. He walked in with this can and left it in my fridge. I don't know if he was intending to drink it or intending us to drink it together, but it ended up in my fridge, so I'm drinking it. And it is not beer, even though I thought it was beer at first, but it's from, I don't know, I don't know what I would describe this as, but I'll just say it. It is from a alcohol maker called Dark Horse, and it is a rosé bubbles drink.
Oh.
So I think it's like bubbly wine in a can.
Huh. Okay.
It's not bad. Let me read it, though. It says, so I'm guessing it's a winery. Dark Horse is a winery, which sounds familiar, but, whatever.
Yeah.
So, Dark Horse, Rosé Bubbles, bright, lively red fruit. Here's to Dark Horses everywhere. Our California Rosé Bubbles opens with notes of stone fruit layered with fresh red berries. Delicate yet lively, this wine is balanced with hints of citrus, delivering a bright, crisp finish. It's very sweet. It doesn't really, it tastes like wine, but it also is way sweeter than wine. It almost tastes more like a wine soda, if that makes sense, which I know sounds kind of gross, but it works, right?
Sounds like sparkling dessert wine.
It's almost more like a rosé, like a pink champagne is kind of what it kind of tastes like to me right now. It's kind of how I'm thinking about it. But like if there was like a rosé flavored or themed champagne, that's kind of what it tastes like to me. Not quite as good as champagne. Like, you can tell it's not quite as good quality, but it still tastes good. So I'm drinking it, and it's fine, and it's bubbly, and that's what I want. But the funny thing is, I thought it was like a rosé beer. Like, I thought it was like a rosé flavored beer, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I looked at it, and I was like, oh, no, this is just wine.
That's not a beer.
That's not a beer. So it's not as strong as wine, too, which is good. Because it's only 10% alcohol instead of what typically wine is like 16 or something like that. But
14, 12, depends on the wine.
Bubbly. All right, cool. So I wanted to talk to you about something because I messaged you on Facebook about this, and you ignored me.
I saved my comments for this conversation.
Oh, is that it? Is that what that was?
I was also busy and didn't articulate that
until
our conversation had moved on.
And
then I didn't circle back around.
It's funny that you were like, oh, I'm planning to talk about that with you on the podcast. And I'm sitting here be like, I'm going to corner him on the podcast and make him talk to me about it since he ghosted me.
And then you forgot what we wanted to talk about.
I reminded you. Yeah, totally. Like right before we started recording, I was like, wait, there's a thing. So yeah, that's funny. So it's funny how this all comes full circle. But I messaged you on Facebook and I said, I have an observation. I noticed that so many games are getting delayed to 2022 that we're in a weird position right now where 2022 is going to see a new From Software game, a new Zelda game, and a new God of War game all in the same year. And the reason, there's a lot of other games that are coming out that year too. But yes, potentially, right. They don't have release dates yet, but those are the planned release dates. So there's other great games coming out. But the reason I highlight those 3 games is because the winner of the Game Awards is going to be very interesting in 2022 because you have the winner of, the game franchise winner of 2017, Breath of the Wild. You have the game franchise winner of 2018, God of War, and you have the developer and game specialty or whatever. It's not the same genre, but it's the same, it is the same genre. It's not the same franchise, but it's, a new franchise in the same vein from the same developer of 2019's winner. So it's basically like, it's going to be a head-to-head of 3 previous winners, all of which are highly anticipated, highly acclaimed, and high-quality developers. And I'm pretty sure, obviously the games aren't out yet, so all of them could suck and none of them could win anything, but my gut is telling me that they're all going to go head-to-head for Game of the Year. Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild 2, and God of War 5, is it, I guess, at this point? So I'm like, I want to talk about that. So let's talk.
Yes, so my discussion thoughts about all of that are, don't forget about Horizon Forbidden West.
Right,
that's coming out next year, confirmed.
It was a 2017 nominee, I believe. So it was up against Breath of the Wild and lost.
So it is the rematch of Breath of the Wild versus Horizon
Forbidden
Zero Dawn.
Horizon.
So Breath of the Wild 2 and now Forbidden West. So that's interesting.
And actually, Horizon Zero Dawn, ironically, lost. Not only did they lose Game of the Year, but they also lost attention in general because it came out a month from Breath of the Wild. So now we'll see what Horizon can do without being overshadowed directly by Breath of the Wild. It'll still come out the same year, but hopefully a few months apart to give it space.
And it has its own notoriety now. It has its own, its own following, and people love it. So, and we know what it is. It's not a new IP anymore. Now it's another entry. So that's an interesting battle. But also, you weren't the only one that's thought. It's all over Reddit. There's articles about it on Screen Rant, etc. about this. And I am still not convinced at all that God of War is coming in 2022. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Because we haven't even seen a single rendered screenshot. And we're almost done with 2021.
There's explanations for that, though, beyond just...
It's not ready. They don't want to show nothing yet.
No, I'm suspecting that what they want to come out the gate with is like a big spoiler, like a big thing. They're going to come out and they're going to show Thor or Odin or something crazy, or even like a grown Atreus. But I suspect, because when God of War 4 came out, it was like a brand new kind of almost soft reboot of the series, right? Like, so they were able to show a lot more. Mm-hmm. But now people are so invested in the story that I think they're going to want to like come out of the gate swinging with something big. So that's my suspicion, because we don't know, there's so little we know about the game beyond just that it's coming and that, or like Ragnarok is going to be a huge part of the story.
Well, Ragnarok is still a fan title. That's not even
exactly that's what
confirmed.
I'm saying. Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said it's not the title. It's a confirmed part of the story, just due to the fact that the promotional material said Ragnarok teaser or whatever says Ragnarok is coming.
Yeah.
So beyond that, we don't know much about the game. And I think that's intentional beyond just like, we're not looking at an Elder Scrolls 6 situation here where it's just like, yep, they haven't even started working on it. Like, they're working on it. They just don't. I think that's my theory, is that they're waiting to show it for a big reveal where it can really steal the show, right? Like, they want to steal the show with that game. I could be wrong.
Another counter argument. Yeah, you could, and so could I. But a counter argument to my point was also, you mentioned Elder Scrolls 6, but Starfield. We never saw a single rendered frame of Starfield until this year, and it is coming out in November of next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I just look at how PlayStation's marketing strategies have been with the PlayStation 5, and they've showcased all these cool games. Like, where's Final Fantasy 16? Where's Gran Turismo 7? The only thing on the horizon, all the puns intended, is Horizon Forbidden West, and we've now gotten a state of play for that. And we've gotten, even last year, a year ago in September, when we got the first gameplay footage, we knew it was coming. Everyone, they said 2021. I knew it was going to be canceled or delayed because of the COVID. But with Ragnarok, or whatever you want to call it, God of War, we never even got a single frame, and we still have it. And we're not, if it does come out over a year from now, you would think that they would do something. Now, if they are holding stuff back on purpose to try and do like the strategic beats throughout next year for shareholders, where they like drive hype in January, drive hype in spring, drive hype at E3 next year, like maybe we'll see something, and it could be a tighter turnaround. But I mean, 2018 to 2022 is 4 years. It's a 4-year development cycle. So assuming they use the same engine, it has been confirmed that the new God of War is going to be on PS4, and it's a cross-gen title. So if they're using the same engine, a 4-year turnaround is doable. I'm just really concerned that we haven't seen anything yet, not even a screenshot. Sure. I don't even know what Kratos looks like.
Yeah, I mean, your instincts are good in that regard. So I generally tend to trust them, even if it's begrudgingly something I don't want. But that said, I could see them pushing it to like December. Because it needs that time. But I could also see them, because of the situation that I described, I could see them being like, oh, we really want the awards and accolades to avoid those other two huge hitters, right?
Yep. And that's a great word that I'm going to piggyback off of. You said awards. Maybe we'll see the first reveal of something God of War at the Game Awards in 4 months from now, or 3.5 months from now.
I'm nibbling on my fingers. Yeah, that'd be great.
But that would probably be a good spot for a teaser, and then that would project marketing into the next year without overshadowing Horizon Forbidden West too much, and then whatever they do with like Gran Turismo 7, etc., to fill in some of the gaps.
Let's take them at their face value. It's coming in 2022, and for the purposes of this discussion, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the possibility? I mean, we know for sure Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild are going head to head, but throw God of War into the mix, and even just what are your thoughts? Again, with completely hypothetically talking about games that don't exist, and I'm just talking about the pedigree of the developers and the franchise and what they're building off of. What are your instincts? Who do you think would win in a head to head there?
That is good. I'm going to say not Breath of the Wild 2.
Really?
I'm going to say that because Nintendo Switch is increasingly becoming distant in technical performance. And so you're not going to get this gorgeous 60 frames per second experience. And be it as it may, I'm not a graphics person. The industry at large generally now isn't like super obsessed with graphics, but there's a lot of gameplay feel about the 60 frames per second that the newer consoles can get that you're not going to get in Breath of the Wild. And the whole jump from 30 to 60 is now the new emphasis, and it's being welcomed and adored by everyone. Like 60 frames per second patches are coming out on backwards compatibility titles, and everyone's extremely excited every time it happens, so much that we're clamoring for Bloodborne to go next because reaction times are better, response times are better, and animations are more fluid. It actually gives the player a better experience. It's not just graphics. So I think Breath of the Wild 2 is already going to be gimped because of that. Disadvantaged for that reason. And you would now have Elden Ring versus, if you say God of War is coming, then at that point it's going to be a toss-up between story and writing. Yeah. Because the gameplay on each end are too different to really go head-to-head as far as... I mean, they're different and they're not.
Well, yeah, God of War was inspired,
stuff, but the Soulsborne stuff genre is its own genre in and of itself because of the complex combat, the difficulty.
Sure.
So it really will come down to story. And that's Cory Barlog versus George R.R. Martin. So who's going to win?
Hidetaka Miyazaki, because he's the one doing all the... Actually revealed that recently at the Gamescom stuff, is Miyazaki, who did Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro. He did the writing for like pretty much all the games except for, I think, Dark Souls 2. And he's doing all the in-game writing for it. Basically, what they confirmed that Martin's involvement was he gave them the world building and he gave them the general kind of like story, and then allowed them to go ham. And so they've probably made changes and adjustments to fit their needs. But
always,
Miyazaki and his team at From Software have done all the in-game writing for Elden Ring. So, but still, two master storytellers, Cory Barlog and Miyazaki. They're both masters at their craft and telling video game stories in completely different ways. So I agree. I agree about that for sure. I talked a week ago when we did the news show and kind of covered some of the Elden Ring announcements. I talked about how I believe From Software's Dark Souls series inspired the way that Breath of the Wild handled exploration in their games, and to make their open world in Breath of the Wild, with the fact that they don't hold your hand, they sort of expect you to discover stuff on your own, due to your own sense of curiosity. That's totally a Dark Souls thing, and I fully expect that they're going to be doing that kind of open world game design in Elden Ring, and then borrowing from Breath of the Wild in scope, right? So, whereas Breath of the Wild borrowed from them in spirit, Elden Ring, I think, will then be borrowing again from them in scope. So we may even see Elden Ring feel very much like a Souls version of Breath of the Wild, which could be completely revolutionary for that genre as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas God of War...
Lots of potential.
Right, God of War is probably going to be an incredible story, an incredible experience, but I can't imagine them completely flipping the script on the genre like Elden Ring is. So my money's on Elden Ring, but I could see it going anyway in that three-way.
You said three-way.
I did. All right.
We're a family-friendly podcast.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I still stand by it's going to come down to story. I know Game of the Years over the last, with the exception of like Overwatch, and I think, we had Hades, we had Sekiro, we had God of War. Like, those are all really big single-player story hit games, which both of these two are. So, like, I don't know.
All three of them are. Well, less so Breath of the Wild, maybe, but...
Right.
Did you say Hades? Because Hades didn't win.
Hades didn't win Game of the Year?
No. Hades was up against Last of Us, and Last of Us won.
Oh, yeah, Last of Us. Yeah. Duh. Yeah. So that's, again, story heavy. That's what I was getting at. It's like, it's the massive, big stories, not necessarily the innovative gameplay.
Right. So, okay. All right, well... discussing and theorizing about Game of the Year winners and who's going to get the accolades are one of our favorite things, but...
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Favorite things.
It's a serious segment of our show where we like to share with you the thing that we're most excited about, the thing that we have discovered or rediscovered or experienced, in hopes that you are inspired to go out and find your next favorite thing. So... I just talked a lot about Elden Ring, so if you want to talk about your favorite thing, then please do.
Sure. So Jimothy has a yearly beach trip that has been going on now for several years, and I had a chance to go this time. So that happened over the weekend, and that is why I went to Dogfish Head, because Jimothy has a beach trip in Ocean City, where we all met. So T-Bone of the show, friend of the show, met me here at my house, and we drove up together, and we were early. There was no agenda, and we were like, Dogfish Head is like a 20-minute drive out of the way, so let's go. And we stopped at Dogfish Head. He's never been there before, and we had a couple of beers, and we went shopping, where I contributed all of my alcohol for the weekend from Dogfish Head, because I'm a Dogfish Head fanboy plebe.
Totally.
As everyone knows. And the whole weekend was amazing. We were playing tons of board games. We drank a ton of different beers and mead and all kinds of good stuff. We went to an excellent restaurant called Dry 85 that was like a Prohibition era type cocktail restaurant place. We sat outside, so we didn't really get the full vibe, but the food and drinks were awesome. We went to the beach for a day, lots and lots of board games. I think I mentioned that already. We played Among Us for the first time. We played some Jackbox games, and it was just a whole weekend of I got away from the grind of parenting and working constantly, and it was great to take a breath of fresh air and go out and just have some fun, let loose for a little while.
That's awesome.
And so that was my favorite. You just did that. You went to Asheville.
What? No. When?
When was your guys' weekend? Not Asheville. I'm probably wrong.
Oh, no. I got
Jeremy
you.
And all the people.
That was a while ago. That was okay, yeah. No, I got you. I'm tracking.
That's, right. You did that.
Yeah, that was back in May. But yeah, you're right. In the grand scheme of being a parent and getting away, right. You're right.
That's the only time since we had some friends get married. I believe it was Kevin who we had on the show.
Well, then now that I've got 2 kids and one's a newborn and the other's a toddler, I can't even imagine getting out of the house for anything.
That's why I only had one night at the bachelor party, because that bachelor party happened when my son was a newborn. So I got one night out versus the 3 that I just got.
I don't even think I would have been able to get that. It would have to be someone getting married for me to be able to get out there.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Man. Mm-hmm. All right. Cool. My favorite thing is, this is kind of sentimental, but it's also nostalgic for many of our listeners probably. My favorite thing right now is the Pokemon theme song. And you may be like, Pokemon theme song?
Yes, always.
What are you, like, obsessed with it or something? And
you should be.
You should be, of course. And if you don't know the Pokemon theme song, you should go find it right now. If you do know the Pokemon theme song, you should go ahead and just look it up right now because it's going to be in your head the rest of the night. Anyways.
Yep.
But the reason it's my favorite thing is because I started watching it with my son. Like, we haven't started watching Pokemon yet because I think the show itself is probably going to be just a little too scary for him at the age of 2. He's close, but I don't think he's ready quite to watch the show yet. But we were watching the theme song because he started seeing, like, I think we started playing Pokemon Go a little bit together. Like, I started introducing him to elements of Pokemon. He loves Pikachu. So I started watching the theme song with him. Now it's a nightly ritual. Every time I get him ready for bed, put his pajamas on, brush his teeth and all that stuff, he asked me to sing the Pokemon song with him.
Yes.
And he fills in the verses. So, I'll go, I want to be the very, and he'll go, best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test. Like, he fills it, and he can do a lot more of the words than I sometimes think he can too. Like,
yes.
And I'll hear him singing it by himself and stuff. I'm just like, yes, Pokemon. So it's a bonding thing with my son. It's great. But a little funny story with that real quick is I kept getting to the part of the song where it goes, our hearts are true, our courage will hold us through, and expecting him to fill out the finish the line. And so I would go, our courage will, and he kept saying, courage owl face. And I was like, owl face? What the heck are you saying? Why do you keep saying? And he kept saying, like, insisting, like it would completely derail our little song together because he kept saying, courage owl face, courage owl face. And I'm like, what are you saying? And tonight, literally like a bolt of lightning, like 2 hours ago before we started recording, it hit me what he was saying was there's a line in the second verse of the song, which I've also taught him, where literally it goes, with courage I will face.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking, yeah.
Yep. So he's just skipping ahead to the further part because the word courage was triggering him, and I didn't realize that until just now. I was like, oh man, that's funny. So yeah, it's a heartwarming tale of a 30-year-old man and his 2-year-old son singing Pokemon theme song.
I was listening to Pokemon theme song at work. We were blasting it in our lab, and we were rocking out with a bunch of like 25 to 40-year-old men. That's
a blast. I remember I would do it. We'd play it. There was a play. I had to be in my theater program in college. I had to do like a couple of plays. I had to actually be the tech for, like help do the sets and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a requirement, which makes sense. Like they want everyone to be involved in all aspects of the theater. I remember there was one show that I was doing set for, and we'd have to sweep the stage like before each show, and we'd always put the Pokemon theme song on blaring, and then we'd sweep the stage, rocking out to Pokemon. It was awesome.
Yes.
So, yeah, good stuff.
That's life-giving stuff right there.
It's amazing, yeah. So go listen to the Pokemon theme song. That's my favorite thing. You should go do that. Everyone, right now. Pause the show, listen to Pokemon.
Yep.
All right, you back? Great, yep. Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment, which is... DLC. Stands for downloadable content. It is a fun little game, gimmick, mini sub-discussion, conversation you wouldn't normally have about video games. Our prompt tonight is related to our topic about loot boxes, where I asked, what if other consumer industries use loot box design for their monetization? So what would it look like for a loot box to be how, like, Netflix worked?
All right.
Or pick anything. I guess Netflix is
I have a great idea. It's kind of funny.
You got okay, let's hear yours first.
Shoes.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, yes. So you go into, I don't know, Foot Locker or whatever, and legit, like, you have a box, you pay $30 for it.
You've already went too far. When you get to Foot Locker, you are met with a bouncer outside that requires a cover.
Yeah.
So you must pay $10 to $25, depending on the day of the week or the night. And if there's an event going on, it could cost you $30 to $50, maybe $60 just to get in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that happened. So you ka-ching, you spent your cover charge to get in. Now you're met with a bunch of generic white, black, or blue shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Like, there's nothing else. You can't see it unless you talk to someone else. And then maybe you have to do something, say a phrase or do a fist bump or some secret handshake to unlock the side room that will allow you to buy different shoelaces and maybe a different color sole on the shoe, or maybe a different color tongue.
No, it's totally, there's rows and rows of boxes. You open the box and it's just disassembled parts of shoes. But you don't know what's in each box. and you open it up, and it's like sometimes you'll get like 3 pairs of shoelaces and a sole, right? But they're all from different shoes, different
but
styles
all those
of
boxes
shoes.
cost money.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Each one you're paying $30 for a box,
Yep.
and it comes with a bunch of different shoe components. And they totally tout that, like, you can customize your shoes, put together your shoe, but you're never sure if you're going to get the same, so you're expected to keep paying until you get a full pair of shoes, and that maybe looks like the shoes you want.
Yep, and you have to spend as much time as it takes and as much money in there, constantly paying more money for new boxes, and then you walk out with one good-looking pair of shoes and 6 cartfuls of garbage that you have no use for at all because they don't make a shoe. And then you walk out and you'll have spent thousands of dollars.
Yep.
And you will feel terrible about yourself.
I love it. All right, I've got one. You ready?
Yeah.
Landscaping services.
Oh my gosh. a tractor trailer pulls up into your yard. What do you want?
Big question mark on the side.
Yep. And a cannon erupts from the back of it and fires landscaping stuff into your yard.
No, you forgot a step. First, you have to mow your own lawn. You have to spend an hour mowing your lawn, because that's a requirement. Before they can make your lawn look good, you have to put in some work first, right? Of course.
Yeah.
But you're still paying them to mow your own lawn. Number 1, go. And then from there, a cannon shoots
random crap into your
flowers
yard
and plants.
And then if you do pay for the services for someone to do it for you, it's an upcharge. But then they'll fire the cannon into your yard, and then someone will come out and like make it look like what it's supposed to be. So if a bush fires out of your yard, they'll plant the bush for you and put it where it needs to be, and like, but you don't know what kind of colors or flowers you're gonna get.
And when your
HOA, what kind of seed you're gonna get.
When your HOA comes and says, "Hey, like, you can't do this anymore. We need these properties to look good," the company that does this landscaping is going to say, "It's not ruining house properties. It's making them more surprising."
It's adding diversity to the looks of the yard in our neighborhood.
It's surprise value.
Oh my gosh.
The surprise, of course, being lower value. Oh man, that's funny.
Yep, you have no control over what it's going to be, and sometimes you get red mulch, sometimes you get brown mulch, and it's fun.
Yeah. All right, well, we want to hear from the listeners. What is a consumer industry that you want to see Lootbox you want to see ruined by loot boxes is what we want to hear from you.
I'll whet your appetite, audience. Think about cars.
Oh man,
that would be fun.
There's so many children's toys. Yeah, there's so many different things. Pets. Can you imagine pets?
Oh my.
All right, we want to hear what your thoughts are, and don't worry if you don't know what a loot box is. If you are not an initiated listener, then we're going to spend an entire episode talking about it. So listen closely to what we're talking about tonight as we explain what these things are.
Stay a while and listen.
Yeah, stay a while and listen. And if you, over the course of listening to this, find this whole thing to be as absurd as we do and are thinking to yourself, that's ridiculous. What if they did that with X? Then we want to hear your thoughts. So please, Termite, share with the Pod Smashers and other listeners of the internet where they can share their DLC feedback and ideas if they have them.
You can go to 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website. We have links to all of our podcast platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Google Play, Apple Podcasts, etc. So you can find our podcast across anywhere you would like us to be. You can also find links to our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. We have a Discord server. There's a link to that server in all of our show notes. We have a YouTube channel where all of our Twitch streams go for video on demand consumption. We have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash, where we go live every Monday evening at 8 p.m. for a news show, and every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. for a weekly gameplay live stream that something we're digging will stream for us, for y'all. We do it for y'all. Hang out with us is what I meant to say. So come join in on the fun. Follow us along. Please give us a review on your platform of choice. It helps the algorithms bubble us up to get attention and grow our audience so that we can have a more healthy and fun community.
Huzzah! Yes, we need more voices in our community. We love the voices we have, but the more voices, the better. So please, please, please join us and talk with us. All right, loot boxes. So let's jump in. Tonight we are talking about the rise and the fall of the loot box empire. It is a weird and still ongoing. You know, again, I hinted at that at the beginning, but there are absolutely still games that have loot boxes and still use loot box monetization strategies. in their games, but
they are taking a new form.
They
so
are, or they're changing, they're evolving, and it sort of has fallen out of the discourse, and it also has significantly taken a huge. They've sort of backpedaled a lot on the design. So there was this weird blip of time though that happened around between probably 2014, I'd say, and 2017. We'll say it dragged into 2018. So the mid to late 2010s really saw this spike of game mechanics that we lived through. And it was a really weird mark on the history of gaming. And so we're going to talk about it tonight. We've mentioned this podcast idea in many different episodes that we did, and now we're kind of like, we've been talking about how we want to do a whole episode dedicated to the loot box, so here we are. So to start, for our uninitiated listeners, people who maybe they weren't gamers over the last 5 years and have recently got into gaming, maybe they are non-gamers and just sort of interested in this culture or the way we do it, the way we talk about things on our show, doesn't matter. Let's pretend that not everybody's on the same page, and let's talk first and define what we mean by a loot box and how they work, and maybe we'll talk about some various differences in implementations of them. We can dig more into that later too, but we'll talk about kind of different forms it takes. But
once again, Wikipedia coming in hot with the great definitions. In video games, a loot box, also called a loot or prize crate, is a consumable virtual item which can be redeemed to receive a randomized selection of further virtual items or loot, ranging from simple customization options for a player's avatar or character to game-changing equipment such as weapons and armor. A loot box is typically a form of monetization, with players either buying the boxes directly or receiving the boxes during play and later buying keys with which to redeem them. These systems may also be known as gacha, based on gashapon, capsule toys, like Japanese, and integrated into gacha games. They originated from loot systems in massively multiplayer online role-playing games and from the monetization of the free-to-play mobile gaming.
Sweet.
So there you go.
We'll dig into the history. If none of that necessarily makes sense to you, we had talked about Pokemon. Remember how Pokemon cards, you'd get booster packs, and you'd go to the store and you'd buy a pack, and it'd be sealed, and you'd open it, and sometimes you'd get a holographic card, and it was super powerful and valuable, and everybody wanted it, and all your friends at school would drool over it. And sometimes it would just be a bunch of like Pidgeys. Like, that is exactly what a loot box is, except it's a video game. And so it's a very specific form of microtransaction. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if the word microtransaction was in that definition.
Just a form of monetization.
Yeah, well, it's a form of monetization, but it is a microtransaction, right? Like, it's like you pay $3 to $10 or whatever for a loot box. It may have the things you want. It may not. There may be other ways to earn them beyond paying for them directly. There may not. But one way or another, like, it's meant to kind of catch you on, like, get you hooked to the randomness and the excitement of getting, like, opening it up and getting the thing you wanted or a thing you didn't know you wanted. But we'll get it. We'll dig into it. So how do they work? Like, how, we kind of talked about what they are, but like, how do they work? What is the kind of main principle that they operate off of, and kind of the very basic design of a loot box? What, I don't know what a loot box is. Explain it to me. Describe it to me. What does it look like? How does it sound? And then how does it work?
Mostly often applied to shooter games, but you have a loot box, crate, or lockbox. It's a thing you can unlock that usually requires real money when you acquire one. So you can acquire a crate or a loot box, and you can spend money to open it. That's one way it works. And when you open it, you get a random selection of in-game items that you might like, and that can range from...
explodes. There's explosions and colors.
It's usually very visually appealing and sounds
sound effects,
awesome.
Yeah.
And
all those little dopamine. Yeah, all those little dopamine hits. The quintessential loot box to me is the Overwatch one, where it spits out these little coins, and they're different, and you don't know what colors they are until they it's all revealed.
And there's the color rarity system. So you have green's common, and blue is a little bit more rare, and purple's even more, and yellow is the legendary one. Yeah.
It's all shiny and sparkly, and when you get it, it's the big.
And
deal.
they can be like emotes that your character, like dance moves that your character would do to show. Every one of these things are showy. So it's either like a certain skin, or it's like a skin for your guns, or you can say certain catchphrases, you can do certain dances, but it's to add it's getting that value to this social aspect of games where you can kind of, I'm a real fan,
right? It can
or
be that.
I'm better.
It can also
awesome.
be items that help you win and help you play. I mean,
that's
like,
the more nefarious side of it.
Well, yeah, but it's a thing that happens because remember, these were inspired in many ways by those booster packs. They're inspired and they find their origins in those trading card deck building games where you'd go and you'd spend money to get a random assortment of things. The reason, again, I'm one of the things I want to talk about how it works. I really wanted to emphasize this idea of randomness, chance.
Yep.
That random chance means that that you could get what you want, but you probably won't, which means you'll spend money until you do if you fall for the trick, right? These games will often give them away for free, or you'll earn, like Overwatch, for example, again, coming back to that because it's the quintessential example for me. You earn experience when you win games and play matches, and so you'll earn loot boxes at a fairly steady pace already, but it gets you hooked to that point where you keep getting the stuff you keep getting some stuff you want, but mostly stuff you don't want, and then the stuff you do want sits there staring at you. Either other players are using it or the game's promoting it, and it makes you be like, well, you know what? If I just spent $10, I might get it. I'll increase my chances of getting it, right? Why not? And so that's kind of, it operates off of that principle of like randomness. It's another form of Skinner box techniques where it gets you to push that button until you get the dopamine rush that you're looking for.
Yep.
And in this case, pushing that button is your credit card, charging your credit card. So yeah, but they're definitely designed in such a way to make you like, again, they can be everything as simple and superfluous as cosmetics, but they could be containing things that are like, Hearthstone, even within the same family of Blizzard games. Like Hearthstone, it's a card game, so its entire principle is built on you spending money on loot boxes or booster packs, whatever they call them. It's the same thing, and getting cards that are more powerful so that you can beat your opponents. Period. Yep. That's how it works. So cool. Yeah, we've already talked about a little bit of the various implementations of it, so let's move on to the next thing. Why? Well, we're going to get to the history eventually, but we're going to kind of work in a little bit of a reverse order than we typically do. Before we jump into the history, I want to talk a little bit about why is this attractive? What is so attractive about this to developers and publishers? Why are they profitable? Why are they controversial? So let's talk about the why. Why is this such a big conversation?
Why is this happening?
Yeah, exactly.
It's because it makes a crap ton of money.
So much money. Did you pull up any stats? Do you have any stats?
I remember hearing a stat on a podcast in 2018 or 19 that EA made $2.6 billion on microtransactions and loot boxes alone. That's not including any sales of any games or any subscription services or anything. It's just on microtransactions. So that's off the top of my head, but you can look at stats online.
I saw something that even the projected economic gains of loot boxes that are anticipated over the next even the next 5 years. Again, we're talking about this as if there's something in the past, but it's still happening. And the projected like overall like earnings from loot boxes or something, like they're expecting like I think I saw something like $400 billion over the next 5 years or something ridiculous. I'm like,
you're
man,
almost there.
I'm almost. I'm
okay, so this is in millions. It's hard to say. So Statista is the website that has a lot of great stats about stuff.
Yeah.
So in 2020, consumer spending on gaming loot boxes and currency packs worldwide was 15,265 million. So that translates to roughly 15 billion, I believe, if I do my math correct.
Sure.
So that's $15.26 billion.
Oh my gosh.
Just in loot boxes and currency packs.
This year.
In video gaming. Uh-huh. Yeah, video gaming and esports. So if you look at, that's just one slice of the gaming industry pie. It's insane amount of money. It's ridiculous.
Right, and again, it's attractive because it's like, it's minimal design, all things considered, right? Like we'll talk about some of the design implications later, but like it's very minimal like effort on the developer's part to design the system in a way that's like attractive. And then it's also like you get people to spend money on things they don't want. And it's again, it's totally operating off of principles that are proven scientifically to exploit weaknesses in the human brain in order to make money. It's like legit 100% everything you expect like corporations to, like, they've researched this, they've invested money in just figuring out ways to push the buttons in your brain to get you to spend money on them. And this is the result of it, right? Like, so of course it's super attractive. They spent a lot of time figuring out the system and getting it to work the way they want it to, and it's working. It's working.
Yeah, and in case you're wondering what research they did, the market research for this was back in 2003 when smartphones came out, and those free-to-play cell phone games needed a way to make money.
Yeah.
And so they were free to play, but all of the game's content was locked behind either limited plays per day or some sort of currency system you needed to earn or pay for to continue playing. And so that was kind of the grandfather of it all. And then realizing you could take this idea with like trading cards and roll that into gaming, and you could start making money, printing money, essentially. It has evolved over the years from the free to play rush to marrying MMORPG rarity and having that kind of go with trading cards and holographic cards versus common, uncommon, etc. Like, what are the chances you get each one, etc. All the systems kind of thrown together, and like you said, with low effort on the developer part and very little content to add to the game. Like, it's just a skin, or it's just something, that might change
and they
some
can
stats on the back end. Like,
they can make big deals about
promotions.
Yeah, promotions. Like, ooh, like. The development that goes into full expansion of a game, like all new game modes and new enemy types and new loot and new blah blah. For all, again, the popular thing these days are these live service games that continue to release new content, right? It's so much easier to just develop like, oh, we're gonna do a Halloween event this year, and we're gonna do loot boxes that have items themed around Halloween. So much easier to just like whip up a few more skins and dance and like funny, Halloween thriller dances or whatever that your characters can do. Way less development overhead than coming up with like an expansion, right?
Yep.
Or DLC or something like it, that has full like all new game modes and new story and blah blah. Like, all that takes so much more developmental effort than a fun Lootbox theme.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's low effort for just obscene amounts of reward. So therein lies the question: why are they controversial? What's the problem?
Well, the biggest problem that was introduced that led to everything changing was the pay-to-win idea, and that was where you have an online. Well, there's two major concerns, and one is the pay-to-win. So if you have an online game, and you have like PvP, so you have 8 versus 8, 4 versus 4, 2 versus 2, 1-on-1, whatever. If your ability to pay more money can get you an advantage over the other player, that's not fair to anyone, because that creates, income disparity, and people can't always afford the right stuff. So it's just like the rich win and the poor lose, and no one's having a good time, and it sucks. And
right.
That's
so
capitalism.
It's not about skill; it's about who's richer, which is totally like. Yep, exactly.
Terrible.
That's freaking class warfare right there, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. And the other issue was you pay full price for a video game, 60, 70, 80, 100 if you get a legendary edition that comes with a bunch of content. And in addition to that, the developer is continuing to ask you of more money to get content that's already in the game, but it's behind a paywall. And so it's controversial in that, well, I spent the price of this game. It's $60. I need to get everything that's on the disc. That's what I want. And the DLC movement back in the late aughts and early 2010s experienced the same thing, where games like Assassin's Creed, I'm just throwing an example, it's not a big title would come out, and there would be actual content locked behind a DLC paywall for like an extra level or an extra dungeon or like extended content and story, but it's on the disc that you spent $60 to get. So that was a whole controversial thing, and that kind of evolved into microtransactions and loot boxes, where now the content that I earned, that I deserve by paying full price, is now locked behind this silly randomized gotcha game that's problematic.
Yeah, and not just that, like the other big problem is, the other major controversy, and we'll totally hit on this when we talk about the history, is what's the difference between a loot box and a slot machine, right? Like, it's basically gambling. The difference is, a slot machine, you could at least make your money back. You could win big and get.
It's not designed to, but yeah.
No, but like you could. That's the point. Is like, that's why people spend billions of dollars gambling every year, is because they think, well, they either think or they get a taste of, like, you can go to the blackjack table and you can win, and you can make, like, you could walk out of there with, if you're smart and you win, you quit while you're ahead, and you walk out of there with more money than you walked in with. that's at least something redeeming about gambling, right? Like, you could make money gambling. With this, you just spend money, and all you get out of it is a shiny that gets you nothing
Tchotchke.
in the real world, right? Yeah, tchotchke, yep. Basically. Like I suppose maybe you could, like, if you get like a super rare thing, you could sell that account illegally, but that's not. Again, that's super frowned upon. They don't want you to do that because the way it's designed is you get nothing out of this other than, like, you know, I guess, like, notoriety within the game. It's all very, very, like, Black Mirror, kind of like, oh, like, you get it's just vanity. You get nothing but vanity out of it. And if that's meaningful to you, then, like, by all means, I don't want to yuck someone else's yum. Don't get me wrong, I love getting cool skins and loot in Overwatch or whatever, or formerly did before the Blizzard debacle. But, you know, it's it really ultimately is like, the player don't really get anything tangible out of this, and the developers and publishers get billions of dollars. Yep. It's insane. So this is even less good. So again, and then being that many of these games are targeted to kids, that's where it gets, like, super controversial. It's like, is this gambling, number one? And if it is gambling, why are we letting it happen to kids without any recompense? Because kids are going to grab their parents' credit cards and potentially send their parents into crippling debt within minutes. It can happen within minutes.
And kids don't understand what they're doing.
Nope. They don't. Not only do they not understand what they're doing, but their brains are being exploited for that exact scenario. And even if it may only happen to a small percentage of kids and parents, it doesn't matter. It's still exploitation, and it's disgusting. So that's why it's. You can tell I'm fired up about this topic.
Yeah.
All right. So where did this come from? Where did this thing even come from? Why is this even a thing we have to talk about in this timeline of our history?
Yes, and there is a wonderful article that I do want to break out from Screen Rant that kind of walks through where this whole thing started. A problematic history. Microsoft launched Xbox Live in 2002, an online platform that enabled players to purchase DLC, downloadable content released by game developers. In early 2005, Microsoft had created the concept of microtransactions for developers across the industry to use. In 2006, Bethesda releases the first ever form of microtransaction in the history of gaming industry on that platform. The developer released 2 horse armors in Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, for $2.50, which were deemed too expensive for an in-game cosmetic item. While consumers were okay with the concept of microtransactions at first, the idea of paying anywhere between 3 to 4% of the full price of the game they purchased didn't sit right. The cosmetic item was released as a test to see how players would react to the market. However, Bethesda would continue releasing new content in the form of microtransactions despite the negative backlash. We're not going to make any knee-jerk decisions based on it, the armor, being available for 5 hours. We'll see what folks think and put out a few others we have planned and figure out where to go from there. At the time, Vice President of PR and Marketing Pete Hines stated. Nevertheless, the horse armor would become the 9th best-selling DLC in Oblivion and was purchased continuously for more than 2 years after release. Game franchises like Assassin's Creed would emphasize heavily on monetizing later on, and it's not the only one. The next significant shift for monetization was in 2008. The iOS store was instituted with apps and games using microtransactions as their primary funding source. 3 years into this evolution process, iOS apps made over $3.6 billion in revenue, over 15 billion downloads, and 80% of that revenue was due to mobile games. The iOS store continues to grow with xCloud coming this year. Suddenly, developers from the gaming industry succumb to the same method to capture the same success. And then you go into stuff like online all-the-time games like GTA Online. MarketWatch reported that Grand Theft Auto 5 earned Take-Two Interactive $6 billion in revenue so far. Understandably, a chunk of that making was based on game sales, but GTA Online's microtransactions contributed to the remarkable sum. Shark cards have become a crucial part of the online experience, with almost every single item being locked by in-game prices. Most notably, vehicles and businesses are costly, and players must grind endlessly only to get the bare minimum. The alternative is spending $100 to get $8 million of GTA dollars. And while it sounds like a lot, it isn't. Grand Theft Auto Online's high-end vehicles, businesses, nightclubs, and aircraft can cost between $2 million and $10 million in-game dollars. Keeping that in mind, that's only the base model of said items. So that's how they kind of evolved. And then another example of controversial game was Middle-earth: Shadow of War. This is the one that really infuriated me, as the game featured a predominant problem of microtransactions and loot boxes at launch. As the protagonist, players are able to recruit an army of orcs. Orcs were purchasable with real money via loot boxes, and while they weren't required at the start, towards the end is when they become integral.
Which is so disappointing, because you remember in the first game you had to recruit every dang orc in your army, right? Like you got to make an army of orcs, but you had to like go and like get every single leader on your own. I don't know. It's so, but yeah.
Well, and I'll get to why this is problematic, and if the article doesn't get there, I will. Yeah. After the main story, players had the choice of either forming and leveling up a powerful army of ridiculously high-level orcs by foregoing a method of grind that put players into an endless loop, or pay real money and retrieve the orcs that way.
Boo.
After this, the game was criticized and accused of being a pay-to-win, especially since it locked the endgame behind a paywall.
Boo.
Several months later, so the controversy here for me is that regardless of the existence of the system, the existence of the system drove the development, which means the entire game was built around its existence.
They had an ending. They had an ending that was either locked, like the ending. So there was like you got one ending of the game if you didn't go through this grind, but if you did all the stuff or whatever, I don't even know what the requirements were, but they had all this list of requirements. If you did the list of requirements, then you got a special ending. So what ends up being the case was the ending was either locked behind a ridiculous 40-something hour grind or a paywall. Like, pick your poison. What's more valuable to you, your time or your money? Because you're going to have to pick one to get the good ending of the game. BS. I hate it.
Yeah, and I heard the counter argument is that, well, you don't have to buy anything.
Oh, of course.
Bought the game.
You don't have to get the ending.
That means you're going to spend so much more time grinding because the game was designed to make it as unpleasant as possible for you to play the game normally without using the transaction.
To drive up loot box sales, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like... All right, then loot boxes happen. So loot boxes offer a mystery box containing randomized gift. As we talked about, these boxes range from costumes, gear, game-specific loot. In most cases, gifts that players receive can only be obtained through loot boxes. But in some cases, alternative methods of purchase are available. Many developers separate loot boxes by rarity, the rarer being more expensive, but ensures players a high-end item as an incentive to spending more. An example of this can be found in Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, which sells players alpha packs but doesn't specify each pack's rarity. Instead, the more players pay, the more packs they receive, but there's also a big chance of receiving standard items or duplicates. So yet another way that all of this is...
Back to our shoebox analogy, it would be like there's the premium section where you spend $60, but you're guaranteed to at least have come out with a complete shoe in one box.
Yep.
It may have completely shoelace mismatch to the body of the shoe and the soles, or high heels, but it's a complete shoe. In this case, you're not going to get duplicate shoelaces. Yeah, that's the idea there. I do want to real quick roll back, as Wikipedia has a good benchmark here. As a personal note, I'll say that I do still think that like ultimately the origin of these things are those booster packs for card games from the 90s, like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon trading card game, like all those big, huge trading card games of the 90s, I think really inspired a lot of this.
Yeah.
But the first known instance of a loot box system as we know it is believed to be an item called the Gachapon ticket, which was introduced in the Japanese version of MapleStory, a side-scrolling MMO, in June 2004. Such tickets were sold at the price of 100 Japanese yen per ticket. Like real-life Gachapon machines, players obtained randomly chosen game items when they used the Gachapon ticket on the Gachapon. An in-game booth was distributed across the game world. So, if I'm not that familiar with Japanese culture, but I played Persona 5, and these Gachapon machines were in Persona 5, and they are like a Japanese cultural thing where like it's like a vending machine. You put money in, and like a random toy comes out. And they totally display all the types of toys you could get, but you're never sure what exact toy you're going to get. And so if you hear the term gacha, G-A-C-A, not got you, but G-A-C-H-A, gacha.
Although it's a good pun.
Yeah, exactly. It works in this case. But yes, gacha comes from gachapon, which are these vending machines in Japan that have been around forever. So the gacha and booster packs, I think, sort of combined. Gachapon and booster packs sort of combined to inspire this entire trend. But yes, like, so the biggest example I think today of a gacha game is Genshin Impact. But they're basically synonymous, whether it's gacha or and whether it's titled or named gacha or loot box. It's more or less the same exact principle. Is you pay money for a question mark, and in that question mark is something you may want or something you may not want. And you're basically paying for the random chance of getting the thing you want.
Yep.
Instead of normal commerce where you go and you say, I want that
want
thing,
this.
and I buy it with my money, however much it costs. You are supposed to be able to have the agency as a consumer to determine, is that worth what I'm expected to pay for it? And you are able to determine if that's yes or no. In this case, that removes your agency from it at all by flashing a sexy question mark and maybe dropping the price by a few bucks. So, yeah. All right,
but then something magical happened.
Yeah, go for it. What happened?
And Battlefront 2 came out onto the scene. Star Wars Battlefront 2 from EA.
Yay, Star Wars saved the universe again, right?
Yeah. And I do believe that there was discovered in the game that you could get cards through monetization tactics like loot boxes, and you could pay to win online. And it produced an outrage that got Reddit one of the most downvoted posts in the
because
world
it wasn't
of
just
history of Reddit.
It wasn't just the pay to win thing. It was the, what are the two main characters that everybody thinks about? Like, if I were to say Star Wars and put a gun to your head and say, tell me two Star Wars characters, you'd
Luke
probably
Skywalker,
say
Darth Vader.
Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader,
Yoda.
right?
Yeah.
So the two most popular Star Wars characters, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, were characters you could play in Battlefront, but if you wanted to play it as Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and you wanted to do it straight without spending any extra money, they locked them each behind 40 hours worth of gameplay time. So 80 hours combined to play two of the most popular characters. And players were basically able to discover that before the game came out, and they started calling them out on the internet and say, why did you lock these characters behind 80 hours worth of grinding? Because everybody was, without even having to say it, the implication was you either spend 80 hours or you spend $80. and of course they were called out online for that, and EA's response was, well, we want players to have a sense of pride and accomplishment when earning their characters or whatever.
Someone needs to go pay that PR person a lot of money, because that is genius. That is a ridiculously thought out response, but also for people on the inside, like, we know
the single most downvoted comment in Reddit history was that.
Yep.
The single one comment that got like everybody on the internet to hate that was that comment. So yeah, like, congratulations, guys, well done. So because again, like, they can fluff it, they can try to present it in any way they want. At the end of the day, that's what it is we are making the game intentionally obtuse for you to be encouraged to take the shortcut.
Yep. And since the fan outrage happened, EA backtracked and removed all of the microtransactions in loot boxes, randomization, completely rebuilt the entire system from the ground up to fix it. And that was actually like a good story, a good outcome. Monolith Soft did the same thing with Lord of the Rings, Shadow of War, and they got rid of Monolith Soft made Xenoblade Chronicles. Monolith Productions announced that it would drop its real-world money microtransactions due to its negative impact that the game received as well. So it got to a head. There was a whole lot of controversy among FIFA
because, again, like,
fans, and FIFA's one of the biggest things.
Sure. FIFA, it was huge. But, like, I really want to hit on the fact that, like, historically speaking, what ended up happening, especially with Star Wars, especially with Battlefront, like, before we move on from Battlefront, we have to emphasize this fact that it's Star Wars. It is it's owned by Disney now. Other than maybe Disney princesses and Disney movies, it is one of the things that you associate with, like, kids and nerds, right?
Yep.
And so what happened at this time in history, 2017 was the big push for people to suddenly, like, wake up and realize this is, like, messed up, especially because kids are doing this and spending money on it. And these game designers are basically designing systems to trap kids in an endless loop of spending and exploiting their little tiny brains that aren't fully developed yet in order to make money off of them, hoping that they will grab their parents' credit cards and go on a spending spree, a non-refundable spending spree. It's literally what's happening. So that was correctly identified, and there became a huge pushback. Politicians started getting involved. Laws started being drafted across multiple countries. The Wikipedia lists regulations in China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Germany, Sweden, Poland, European Union, North America. Like, multiple countries began, if not enacting laws to limit loot boxes, they began considering laws to limit loot boxes, all because of Star Wars. And because
at least that was the impetus.
Sure,
but
and
the whole idea was problematic. Cell phone games were there, Fortnite.
Oh yeah,
other things too, like Roblox and like lots of stuff. Like Fruit Ninja had this kind of stuff going on in it. Just anything that would appeal to children, especially with tablets and phones, which parents were increasingly offering their children as ways of distractions in life, which I totally understand.
Sure.
Like, yeah, it just became like this obvious predatory practice that things were just worded certain ways and presented in certain ways with all of the bells and whistles and attractiveness that would. Ooh, that was a good ting. What did you hit?
It's totally not meaning to do that. I was just fidgeting with stuff, and I clinked my glass with my can.
So yeah, I was pretty much done with that thought anyway. But yeah, so it targets kids, and that's
what really. I mean, when you bring kids into it, then suddenly people start paying attention, which is unfortunate. Like it shouldn't have to resort to kids. Like, oh, the poor minds of our children shouldn't necessarily be the impetus for like something being right or wrong. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in. So I'm glad it happened for that reason, is it got people to pay attention to this. So regulations happen. I mean, the regulations would go like anywhere between like forcing developers to have a higher rating on the game. Like you can't make a Star Wars a mature game, but if it's got gambling in it, that was the sort of idea. It was like, well, if it's got gambling in it, you have to make it M for mature, right? Because gambling is an adult activity. So try selling a Star Wars M for mature game in America and see how well you do. It's like
no one would fund that.
Exactly. Yeah. So things like that. I mean, yeah. We're not going to go through all the different countries. What we will talk about briefly is sort of the response, like the various responses to what then happened. So after the 2017, 2018, because it was so late in 2017 that the discourse continued into the next year. So after that, like what happened was various responses to that. So you had every response from like completely, a lot of those, of course, cell phone game makers were just like didn't care and kept going with what they were doing. But you had companies like Blizzard and Overwatch kind of kicked off this major trend in the AAA space of it, and their response was like, well, we just have cosmetic items, so it's not a problem. So we're not going to make any changes, and they didn't. The loot box system is still the only way to get cosmetic rewards in Overwatch.
They really haven't changed at all?
Nope. It's the same thing. You can't, there's no storefront where you can go buy specific skins, nothing. And even Jeff Kaplan, the lead developer of Overwatch for a long time before he left, he said he wanted that to be a system where you could go in and just buy the skin you wanted, and Blizzard like shot him down.
Wow.
So yeah, like it's still all loot boxes and loot boxes alone, because their justification was, we're not pay to win, we're just cosmetics. It doesn't ignore it still ignores the fact that like it still targets kids. It still doesn't do anything to mitigate kids. There were other games. I see if I can find an example really quickly, but there were other games that would implement a system. I think I want to say League of Legends maybe, but I don't want to say the exact wrong game. Doesn't matter. The bottom line is there were games that would implement a system where you could see what was in the loot box before you bought it, which kind of defeats the point as far as the publishers are concerned. But it was an answer to that. Well, it's not gambling if we show you what's in it, right? So that was a answer to it. The other answer was showing you the percentages, the odds. So they would list out like the odds of getting what you want are X, and the odds of getting what you don't want are Y. So that was an answer to it as well. So there were different systems that were put into place to address the controversy. But ultimately what happened, for as far as the big major publishers go, is they just pulled it. A lot of games began to pull it. So I'll just list, after the controversy, Call of Duty, Halo 5, Battlefield, League of Legends, Paragon, Gears of War 4, FIFA 17 are just some of the examples of games that pulled loot boxes from their system or from it after the reaction in 2017.
And I guess we can move on to our next discussion point, which is, what does it look like now that things have changed? Things have been called out, stuff is moving on, and they've evolved. And I want to call out a certain game that I absolutely adored and loved and played, Fall Guys.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it still have loot box transactions, you ask? Because you don't actually buy a box of gear. No. But remember, player attentiveness is currency. Attention is currency now. So what they do is they cycle through the available options with which you can buy. So if you go check the store every 12 hours, it refreshes to a different set of stuff you can buy, encouraging the player to endlessly play to collect currency system. Like there's crowns, there's kudos. Collect your currency so that when the right thing pops in the next 12 hours, you'll be ready to get it. And so it's not necessarily the gambling thing, because you could spend real life money at any given time to get more kudos to buy the things that you want. You can still deplete the store and then have to wait 12 hours. Mm-hmm. So that's like an evolution of loot boxes that are a little less egregious for the whole gambling addiction thing, but still really it's the heart of that system.
Yeah, and I know Fortnite answered it by they removed the random element of loot boxes, and they basically created what's called a battle pass. So the idea of the battle pass is like, oh, we've got these seasons of content, right? Like we got our summer season, we're doing an alien theme, whatever. We did a Marvel theme. The idea is if you pay the monthly subscription or whatever, the battle pass, then you get all the cosmetics or all the rewards for that season, just whenever it comes out. So and they basically turned the loot box model into a subscription model in order to continue to make microtransaction income beyond the purchase of the game itself. I'm sorry, I listed the incorrect games that pulled loot boxes from the system. The correct list is Star Wars Battlefront, Dauntless, Shadows of War, Forza Motorsport, and Rocket League all pulled loot boxes from their games in late 2017. 2018, I think. So yeah, but so that was the list. I listed the wrong set of games, so I'm just correcting myself. But anyways, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing because our last question was like, are loot boxes gone? Like, are they still here? Are they here? And if they are here, are they here to stay? And what do you think will happen in the future of this space? I mean, the big thing is like, we talk about the rise and fall of the loot box, but we got to put fall in quotations, right? Because like they are still around. I mean, Genshin Impact is a huge successful game from MiYoYo or whatever the company's called, and they have a gacha. I mean, it's touted as a gacha game, and they have a loot box kind of system, a gacha system, and I think they call it wishes in that because I briefly played it. But like, they haven't gone away; they're still here, but they've sort of disappeared from the discourse, and they've also disappeared from a lot of those popular, AAA games. And I don't think we'll see a AAA single player game with a loot box system like Shadow of War ever again. And so there was kind of a rise and there was kind of a fall. It hasn't gone away, but it's changed. But I mean, the reason why they've changed and taken new forms and began experimenting with different forms of monetization, I really do still attribute to the fact that they flashed the law at them, right? Like, even if laws weren't made, the threat of laws being made and the threat of these things going to Congress and the Supreme Court was enough to get these big companies to back off of it. The little companies, the smaller companies, they're going to keep doing what they're doing because they're willing to gamble the risk versus the reward on it. But the big companies don't want to draw attention to this because they don't want it to become a thing. So the controversy was important, and the outcry on Reddit was important. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it in the first place was because this is one of those rare instances in the gaming industry where collective outrage actually made a difference.
Yep, sure did.
Like, it really, really, like, God of War is coming out and Breath of the Wild is coming out, and we're not going to see some weird loot box system crammed into it just to make money. Like we won. We did it, kind of. Like, it's still around, but I think it's enough of a victory that like the gaming industry should and could be, or gaming culture could be proud of the fact that we got rid of loot boxes in sort of the mainstream of games. Are games companies still monetizing and still exploiting? Of course they are. And are they going to keep researching and figuring out ways to bring this stuff back? Of course they are. But in the meantime, we won the battle. We may not win the war, but in the meantime, we sort of won this battle. And we've created a system that is more palatable at this point because no one loves microtransactions, but we can tolerate we can tolerate them because at the end of the day, microtransactions still result in games that we like getting made, and that matters. So there's a love-hate relationship with microtransactions, but loot boxes, I think the gaming industry the gaming culture decided this is a step too far. You're making us pay for things that we don't want, and that's a step too far. So, soapbox. Getting off my soapbox now. Any other closing thoughts with that question about are they here to stay and what do you think will happen?
Oh, they're definitely here to stay. If you've ever played a Battle Royale game, you know what loot boxes look like today that are not as egregious. They're not pay to win, like you said. But I know Apex Legends, And Back for Blood, when I played the preview, is just inundated with so many different currency systems, overlays of gear, modifications that are different rarities that don't last forever, but the chance to increase your chances to add to the loot pool, and then the card systems that modify the stamina and the sprinting, reload speed, etc. Like, those are the new monetization systems that have replaced loot boxes that are almost similar in that they give you a higher chance of doing something if you make the most of it, but aren't really gambling either, because you know what you're getting when you buy it. So it's just this new flavor that I don't like it, but it's here.
It's here, yeah. It's not going anywhere. Like I said, they're going to keep trying to figure out a new way to exploit our brains.
Yep.
A newer, subtler way to do it. I've fallen for stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, we're not trying to sit here and be like high and mighty and be like, you know, we're not so dumb to fall for that kind of stuff.
I don't spend money on microtransactions.
I don't really either, but like,
how many skins you bought?
I've not bought a single skin. No, I've not.
What? In Overwatch, you haven't bought nothing?
Nope. I paid $40, I think, for the game when it came out in 2016, and that is all I've ever spent on Overwatch.
Did you have gift card money that you used on it?
Nope.
Did you have any sort of reward money that you spent on it?
Nope.
Oh, nice.
But I've spent money on like not money. I very rarely, if at all, spend money on microtransactions of any kind. But what I have spent is I've gotten the like free currency for various promotions and spent that on microtransactions.
Oh yeah, that doesn't count.
That doesn't count? Okay, all right.
Yeah,
well,
it's free currency. I don't count.
But
so
I have
you like
certainly
Twitch Prime stuff, like that kind of thing.
But like, I mean, I've certainly. What I'm trying to say is I've spent money on stupid purchases before, like impulsive, stupid purchases that were designed to get me to do it. And I think a good example
we all
of
do that,
right?
But that's fine. What makes you happy, dude? Spend your money on it.
No, what I'm saying is like what I'm trying to get at is you shouldn't be ashamed for falling for it, right? Like, you know what's a big scam that I've fallen for? Steam sales. Steam summer sale is a racket, right? And it's totally designed as just a way to get you to spend money on things that you don't really actually need or want.
Yep.
Or have time to, do. So like, they're happy for you to spend $5 on a game that you're never going to play because they still get $5 out of the deal and you get nothing. Yep. So like, I've fallen for that. I've totally, that's totally a thing in the gaming industry that, that I've quote fallen for. So there's no shame in it. We're all susceptible to this. We all have blind spots. So I don't shame anybody for spending money on loot boxes because it's like, I shame the developers and the publishers who are exploiting those things to get money out of people that can't afford to continue to
capitalism,
do that.
Baby.
Yeah. Anyways, so that is our episode on the loot box. What are your thoughts? What is your outrage? Want to hear all of your feelings, your outrage, your this isn't a big dealisms, whatever, your apathy, your outrage. We want to hear it all. And Termite will share with you where you can share those feelings and thoughts if you have them.
You don't give a hoot and you're just like, games are fun and I played them and that system doesn't bother me at all and it's whatever.
Yeah.
And good, I want to know about it. So you can tell us at any of our social media websites. Mostly is where we can interact with our audience members the most, and you can find links to all of those things at 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website where all of our social media outlets are there. Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter. We have a Discord server in the links. The link to it is in our show notes, so hit it up. Come join us in our discourse on Discord. All the puns intended all around. And we are also on Twitch, twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash on Monday and Wednesday evenings at 8. And we have this weekly podcast on all of the podcast platforms of your choice. Also, information there at 80bitpodsmash.com.
All right, so next week, okay, question. Are we going to go down the rabbit hole next week, or do you want to do something different?
I think the rabbit hole relevancy window is shrinking, and we need to get on that.
All right, cool. So next week, we are going to go down the rabbit hole and talk about Is Abandoned, this game that's coming out for PS5 sometime this year. Is that actually a Silent Hills game or in any way involved with Hideo Kojima? We're going to answer that question, and we're going to bump our other topic for later in the month. And so that's what we're going to talk about.
I don't think we're actually going to answer that question, by the way.
No, we're not going to answer the question. We're not even going to necessarily take it seriously, but it's a fascinating conversation about how, like, personalities work and marketing works and the way that, like, video game celebrity works in a way that can also work with video game hype and rumors and speculation. It all like combines into this weird cultural thing, and it's all centered around this storm that's called Abandoned. And we were going to talk about it. So we're going to talk about that next week, September 6th. and get into it and go into all the tinfoil. It's going to be great. That's what you have to look forward to next week.
Look forward to it, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.